Right then, here we are once again in War Thunder, and today we're looking at one of those most wonderful of Russian tanks, the T-26, one of the first tanks ever to be introduced into War Thunder ground forces, back in the days when it was new and exciting. Anyway, as usual, we'll be covering the history and technical details of the vehicle first, and the battle will be later. If you wish to skip straight to the battle, why not click on the link in the description? Right, now that they're gone, us true fans will now experience the wonders that is the history of the T-26.
You know what time it is. It's time for history.
Way back in 1929, Vickers Armstrong, a British company, decided to build a new tank. The resulting vehicle, the Vickers 6-ton, also called the Mark E, was not adopted by the British Army, and so Vickers decided to export it. Many countries bought Vickers Mark E tanks, including Poland, Portugal, Greece, Bulgaria, Bolivia, China and Finland. But the most influential purchaser of the Vickers 6-ton was the Soviet Union. Soviet tank design began during the Russian Civil War, when the Red Army captured several Renault FT-17 tanks from the White Army in 1920. These were reverse-engineered, and by 1922, 15 Russian replica FT-17s were completed. Although this so-called Russian Renault had many manufacturing defects, it provided the springboard necessary for Russian manufacturers to design their own tank. In 1924, the Tank Bureau was created, and they called for an indigenous 3-ton tank armed with a 37mm gun. The Soviet tank manufacturers responded with the T-16, designed by Professor V. Zaslavsky. This tank was very similar to the earlier FT-17, even when upgraded to the T-18. These saw limited success against the Japanese in 1929 to 1932. By the time of the German invasion of 1941, most of the T-18s had been retired to training roles, although some, upgraded with 45mm guns and known as T-18Ms, did see action on the Kiev-Voronezh line. Voronezh. Yeah, mostly as stationary pillboxes. When Britain began selling the Vickers 6-ton, the Soviet Union, who was already licensed producing the Carden-Lloyd Mark IV tankette as the T-27, bought 15 Vickers 6-ton Model A tanks on May 18, 1930, plus licenses for domestic production. The Vickers 6-ton Model A featured 2 turrets side by side, each armed with a single machine gun. This feature was copied by the first Soviet license-built vehicle, the T-26 Model 1931. The T-26 passed its tests, beat its competitor, the T-19, and was in production by January 1931. The T-26 models 1931 and 1932 were both twin-turreted vehicles armed with a single DT machine gun in each turret, although some had the machine gun in the left turret replaced by a 37mm anti-tank gun. But by 1932, production had switched to the T-26 model 1933, which was armed with a 45mm gun in a single large turret, as well as a coaxial DT machine gun plus a similar weapon on an anti-aircraft mount. The model 1935 also had a machine gun in a ball mount in the rear of the turret. Only command tanks had a radio, which were identified by the prominent rail antenna running around the turret. The first time the T-26 saw action was in Spain in 1936. The Soviet Union sold 281 T-26s to the Spanish Republican forces, along with a few BT tanks and a number of armoured cars. The T-26 proved itself to be vastly superior to its opponents in the Spanish Nationalist Army, who were using Italian and German vehicles. For example, in March 1937, during the Battle of Guadalajara, a force of nationalist CV-33 and CV-35 tankettes were wiped out by Republican T-26s. The T-26 was also very effective against the Japanese forces during the Second Sino-Japanese War, culminating with the Soviet victory at Khalkhin Gol in 1939, for which Soviet armor, comprising mostly of T-26s, played a very significant part. The T-26 saw limited action against Poland during the joint Soviet-German invasion of said country, and this was the last time the T-26 enjoyed significant military success. For on the 30th of November 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland. Large numbers of T-26s were deployed, and it was expected that they would easily roll over the meagre defences Finland could muster. However, the Finns used cleverly concealed anti-tank guns emplaced in the Mannerheim line, which tore apart the large formations of T-26s which attacked in the open. The Finns also very successfully used guerrilla tactics against the Russian forces, devising several ingenious ways of dealing with the T-26s, from jamming logs or metal bars into the tracks to throwing improvised petrol bombs, the now infamous Molotov cocktail, onto the engine decks of the tanks. The Finns captured some 200 T-26s and used them against the Russians in the continuation war. Some remained in service as late as 1960. The humiliating defeats of the Soviet forces in Finland caused Russian designers to scramble not only to improve the current stock of Soviet tank designs, but also to develop new and improved vehicles. These improvements to the T-26 included a radical redesign of the turret to a new conical shape to provide sloped armour. Sloped armour was also added to the hull, but it still remained relatively thin due to weight restrictions imposed by the suspension, which had remained unchanged since the Vickers 6-ton of 1931. Despite these improvements, the T-26 was significantly inferior to the majority of German tanks during Operation Barbarossa in 1941. At the time, the Red Army still fielded over 10,000 T-26s, although most were worn out from years of driving over Russian roads. While they were superior to the Panzerkampfwagen 35T featured in last episode, and the Panzerkampfwagen II, the heavier German tanks such as the Panzerkampfwagen 38T, the Panzerkampfwagen III with its 50mm gun, and the Panzerkampfwagen IV significantly outclassed the T-26. This, coupled with the worn-out components, lack of spare parts and fuel, and the large-scale attacks by the Luftwaffe, meant that the majority of T-26s were lost during the first few months of the invasion. The survivors continued plugging along, seeing combat in Moscow, the Caucasus and Stalingrad, and some were still in action around Leningrad as late as 1944. China made extensive use of the T-26 both against the Japanese and later during the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese nationalist forces used T-26s against the PLA until 1947.
Give me all the technical details, baby.
Right then, well here we are in the hangar, or rather in the courtyard with the T-26. There it is there. Isn't it marvellous? Now, the technical details. First of all, this is a light tank. It only weighs around 10 tons, same as the Panzerkampfwagen 53 that we saw in the last episode. However, like the Panzer 35T, this isn't a reconnaissance tank. You don't get the spotting mechanic thing, because it's a battle tank, technically. And crew, you've got 3 dudes in there. You got the commander / gunner, you got the loader, and you got the driver. They're all nicely bunched up, especially the 2 in the turret, so most of the time you can kill this thing with one shot. The power plant is a 91 horsepower Gaz T-26 flat 4 petrol engine. It's back here in the back. It's very tiny, so it won't be hit that often, but it does tend to catch fire when it's hit because it's a petrol engine. Interior layout, well, you got the radiator here, right underneath this little gap here. There's a gap in the armour. Here, I'll show you. Look, gap. So an aeroplane attacking you from this sort of angle, even with regular old machine guns, can set you on fire because your radiator's there. Your fuel tank is back here, at the very back, which is the sensible place to put it. Although there is also another fuel tank here, which is not so sensible. Luckily, however, they are all in the back section, unlike with the Panzer IVs, where it's under the floor. Here is your massive reservoir of ammunition. You get over 200 Well, you get 205 rounds of ammunition in this thing. You only really need 30 at the most, and that will hopefully get rid of some of these racks, because these explode very often. They're the ready racks up in the turret. Yeah, shell goes through the turret, catches one of these shell racks, and it explodes. I'm not sure which ones get taken out first when you reduce the ammo count, but I think it's the bottom bunch. You got some here and some back here. All very lovely. Here you got a vision port. You got some more vision ports so you can see out. Got the gun sight. Got the main gun. More on that later. And the coaxial machine gun. More on that later. And at the very front you got the transmission. The drive sprocket's at the front, so yes, it's more likely to be damaged. Speaking of transmission, the mobility of this thing is not very good. Maximum speed is around 18 miles an hour. That's around 21 kilometers per hour. That's pretty slow. Luckily, however, you'll be able to achieve this speed on relatively flat surfaces. Reverse speed is absolutely woeful. It's only 1 mile per hour. That's around 2 kilometers per hour ish. That's very, very slow. And also try not to reverse steer this thing because it's so slow. It turns very slowly in reverse. Forwards, neutral turning is also very slow as well. So what you want to do is get it up into a higher gear before turning. The armor is absolutely rubbish. It's awful. Here's the gun mantlet. Usually the thickest part of the armor on a tank is 15 millimeters. Doesn't get any thicker than that apart from the gun, which is 20 millimeters. Yeah, it's 15 all around 15 millimeters. That'll stop a rifle caliber machine gun bullet most of the time. 50 calibers, cannons, any other kind of gun, that will go straight through this thing like it's tissue paper. And here, this part is only 7 millimeters thick. Yes, it's sloped back at 80 millimeters, but this part here is only 64 millimeters thick. So if you're unlucky, you get a shot through there that's not even supposed to go through 15 millimeters of armor. Because it's 15 millimeters effective thickness. Yeah, on the back it's same story, 6 millimeters. Aircraft with a 50 cal can get through that. Aircraft with 30 cals will probably be able to get through that. Roof of the turret 10, roof of the hull 10. It's all very, very inadequate. However, the armament on this thing is very good. You get the 45mm 20K gun right here, right in the turret. It's the best gun in the low tiers, that's undisputed. Because very rapid fire, its shells go very quickly, so it's very easy to aim, and you get very powerful shells. You get the APHEBC, which once it goes through the armor, which is very easy for it, it explodes, causing additional damage. Gun elevation and depression, there's nothing really much to talk about. Depression is it's only -6 degrees there, you can see it right there, I'm just reading the thing, although I did test it earlier. And yeah, it's not very good. It's a little bit better than 5 degrees, but it's not as good as 7 degrees. Yes. Also, the gun elevation speed is very slow, so take that into account. If you got your gun pointing up in the air, and then you suddenly see, oh, there's a Panzer III in front of me, it takes a while for the gun to go down, so you can actually shoot at him. Luckily, however, the turret turn speed is pretty quick. It's not, you know, especially fast. It's just it's average, but it is hand cranked, and it turns relatively quickly for a hand cranked turret. Now do bear in mind that the gun is not stabilised, so when you come to a sudden stop, your gun will go bucking around all over the place, and it'll take a moment before you can get it on target. Your coaxial machine gun is a Digturiv DT. You get 1,890 rounds for that in 47 round pan magazines. So, it's better than the Japanese machine guns, but not as good as the American, British or German machine guns. And, it's coaxial, so you can't really shoot at aeroplanes with it. Not that that sort of thing would do much good anyway, although occasionally you can get a lucky hit, can't you, in it? Now, how to kill the T-26 from the front. Basically, shoot it anywhere but the turret. The turret has some awkward angles on it, so you might bounce off the side or bounce off the mantlet. If you get it square on the front, it's probably going to go straight through, but you might bounce off the gun, so why take the risk? Why not just shoot it literally anywhere on the hull? You might get the occasional lucky bounce off the sloped armour piece, but, you know, it's just basically flat, sloped at 22 degrees, as if that makes any difference. It doesn't. Just shoot it in the front here with whatever you've got. From the side, shoot it literally anywhere. Turret, hull, doesn't matter. You know, you get better luck if you aim for center mass, so shoot it in the hull right here or in the turret, because that's more likely to kill both the dudes. From the rear, just shoot it in the turret or the hull. Doesn't really matter, it'll probably go through this part anyway, no matter what you shoot. From the roof, well, you're an aeroplane, you can't aim for specific things, but if you can, try and get a shot down through this little chute, you get extra points for that. And so there you have it, there's the technical details of the T-26. Now, it's time for a battle, wouldn't you think? Here we go.
I don't know what to do without the music.
Alright, so the first battle here didn't go quite as planned. So we're attacking Point C, taking a look around. I did notice there was a tank there earlier, but he was destroyed. Looking all around, making sure there's nothing around. And then, boom! Killed from behind by Stuart. And that's the thing you gotta worry about with the T-26, because it's so slow, you're liable to be outflanked. So keep an eye out for that. Also, the shell went through the arm like butter. Alright, so the second battle here is in Japan, on the new the relatively new Japanese map. Because, yeah, you know, when the Soviets invaded Japan, although they did get close. Anyway, so we'll go with the T-26. There it is there. You can see I've loaded 40 shells. That's 30 of the explosive ones and 10 of the little ones, because I tend to spam shells a lot. You probably only need, at the very most, 30 of both of them combined. So here we are, going towards A. Here we go. Going really quickly. And so yeah, we're going towards A, and we're going to see if we can't shoot up some baddies there. Most of the baddies go towards C and B, the big pagoda and the little pagoda. We're going to go to the little village, and we're already at top speed. This is as fast as it goes. 18 miles per hour. But yeah, making sure that it's very unlikely that we'll be flanked at this point. But got to keep an eye out, got to keep looking, checking those ridge lines, making sure there's no boxy shapes on them. Making sure there's no baddies anywhere. Keeping an eye out, looking ahead. There might be some baddies up in those trees. Probably won't be, but you never know. There might be well, we're on the Russian side. There might be BTs, but there might be Stuarts. So you've got to be cautious when approaching this bit, because they might be hiding out there in the fields, waiting for any T-26s to poke their heads up. And they might be attacking from the side. Sometimes they flank round there to attack the people going for the village. Keep your eyes in those binoculars when driving the T-26. Keep them scanning all around. You can't really afford to make mistakes in this thing. You don't have the armor for it. You gotta be able to spot the enemy before they spot you, and there you just saw how slow it was to get the gun up. That's another thing you gotta take into account. Scanning the village. That is already attacking B and C, and in a moment they're going to attack A. Incidentally, did you just see there? The suspension is very nicely animated. It got all the little joints going. That's quite nice. And there, they're attacking A. And I think I can see one. Just waiting for the gun to get up. Yep, there is a French tank down there. The shell goes through the side. And there you have it. Luckily, the 45mm 20K gun is perfectly adequate in getting through the sides of French tanks, where in fact their increased level of armor works against them, because that activates the fuse zone. Oh, there's a Hotchkiss! And my shell bounces off, catches it at an awkward angle. That is one of the advantages of the French tanks, because they're so weirdly shaped, you can often bounce your shots off, and whoa, we just bounced a shell from a French tank. Here's another disadvantage of the French tanks. Their shells are so terrible. They can bounce off the front of a T-26. Not many tanks can say they've achieved that. So he's hiding behind the ridgeline, only poking his turret up. And that's one of the more armoured points. As you can see, I've switched to the higher penetration shell, but even so, it's bouncing off the side. I can't really see much of the tank, so I can't really aim at him. Bouncing off the angled cheeks of the upper glacis of the French tank there. I'm firing away at something. My shot goes through and does a little damage to the people inside the turret, but unfortunately it doesn't kill him. But there, finally we get a lucky hit, and it goes through the front of the turret, which is flat, but then we're attacked from the side by, what is this? It's a thing. So it's another Hotchkiss. And he kills me. And that's, probably what will happen most of the time. Goes straight through the tiny little angled part of the upper... Quiet, dog! Oh, damn it! Anyway, now that that dog has been murdered, the rest of the battle is kind of exciting. We get to take out the Po-2. I don't do very well in it because it's so slow I misjudged the bomb dropping time. We also go out in the T-60. I like the T-60, more on that later. And we have a little bit of luck there. A couple of shots go through the front of the French tank. And then we're killed. It's all very exciting. And then by the time I'm in the BT, the battle is all but lost. And so there you have it. The T-26, Tier 1 Reserve Russian Light Tank. It's got a good gun, and that's the only thing it's got going for it. It is pretty mediocre in every other respect. No armor, poor mobility, poor internal layout. The gun itself is, poorly handled, no stabilizer, slow going up and down, relatively slow turret. But I love this tank. It's one of my absolute favourites. Just look how cute it is. And when you finally manage to kill one of those dastardly Panzer IIIBs, well, it's a good feeling. Anyway, so hopefully you enjoyed that, and hopefully you'll join me for the next one, where I think we will be looking at the most legendary, the most renowned of Russian aircraft, the infamous Polikarpov Po-2. So, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
So, that's that for another video. It's time to close up shop and head on out. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on your way out, baby. And see you next time.